When most people hear the word epilepsy, they just think of someone who can't look at bright lights for long and never really search further into it. But epilepsy is actually a very rare condition which mostly begins in children between the ages of 8 to 16. I personally have suffered from this disease, and I would really just like to inform the audience about it as best I can. And many of you are probably wondering how rare exactly it is. Well, according to the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institutes of Health, only 1 out of every 100 people in the U.S. have the condition, and it is also estimated that worldwide that number is even less. Epilepsy is drastically different for each person it affects, and it is never the same across the board. Why care? Well, although this condition is still extremely rare, it is still starting to become more common currently, and people should be prepared in case they or someone they know has it. So starting out with the symptoms of epilepsy. Epilepsy can cause many different symptoms, but the main one is seizures. Some of the other causes, it can cause fainting, fatigue, loss of consciousness. Amnesia is also a large part of epilepsy, and staring spells. But for this speech, I'm going to be talking mainly about seizures. So it is important to recognize these symptoms, the seizures, as they may be life-threatening. Seizures that last between 1 to 2 minutes are usually non-damaging and not fatal. But if the seizure lasts more than 2 minutes, the victim's life is at stake. You need to know what to do in the instance of a seizure. If the person is diagnosed with epilepsy, you should go over their procedure with them prior to an event just in case. And usually they will have an injection of a medication that will stop their seizure. There are many different kinds that may be taken orally. It is important to turn them on their side and start a timer, because if the seizure lasts more than 2 minutes, you will need to call the paramedics as soon as possible. As said before, there are more and more people that have epilepsy nowadays, so it is important to know the symptoms just in case someone were to have a seizure without a diagnosis. This knowledge can save someone's life. So what is the cause/reason that people end up with epilepsy? Well, there are many different causes that are associated with this condition. Most common is brain disorders according to WebMD.com. There are also things like head trauma, brain tumors, and infectious diseases that can take part in the diagnosis of epilepsy. And as I said before, most cases of epilepsy begin in children 8 to 16 years of age, and the most common cause of epilepsy in this age group is a disorder called cortical dysplasia, according to TexasChildren's.org. So this right here is actually a picture of cortical dysplasia. It shows the parts of the brain where you can see these spaces. They refer to it as gray matter spaces, and it's basically where the brain did not grow properly whenever the baby had not been born yet, whenever it was still in the womb. And so the neurons in the brain actually misfire, and which leads to seizures. That's basically the definition of epilepsy. And so cortical dysplasia causes 2 types of seizures in people. One is called a tonic-clonic seizure, which are the most noticeable. They are when the person is likely unconscious and has continuous convulsions, clenching the jaw and biting the tongue. The second are called absent seizures, which are rather hard to spot. They're often confused with daydreaming and can cause a person to lose focus even for a second and forget what they're doing, almost like a stutter. It is important to understand these causes in case someone you know ends up with epilepsy, so you can try and find the most effective way to deal with it. Lastly, I'm going to explain the effects epilepsy has on a person's life and how they deal with the burden. So first of all, epilepsy has no cure, period. Unfortunately, epilepsy is not something you can cure. It really just sticks with you your entire life, and people who have it must simply find a way to counteract it. So medication is a way that you can counteract, not cure, but help reduce the what they call the seizure threshold. and which I actually have right here. This is my medication. The most common one is called Keppra. It's the most effective, but it still doesn't work with every condition. Like cortical dysplasia is actually one of the hardest forms of epilepsy to cure. So there's also brain surgery. So brain surgery is much more effective than medication, but at the same time it's expensive and it has many side effects, including dementia, mood swings, and drowsiness. And so here is a picture of where the brain surgery, a normal brain, and the brain of someone who has cortical dysplasia. You can see there's a gap before and after. And so one of the scariest things about epilepsy is that people can lose up to 10 years of their life expectancy. There's also a slight chance that they could die in their sleep. They're called nocturnal seizures, which are often fatal. Personally, I suffer from this condition and have had both types of seizures in my lifetime. I've been greatly affected by this condition, and it has hindered many things a normal person would do in his or her life, such as like athletics. I was a swimmer, I can't really do that anymore, and also like driving isn't really a big thing for people with epilepsy. But it is a hard thing to control, and again, like I said, cortical dysplasia is one of the types of epilepsy that is very hard to control with medications. But I actually have been seizure-free for 6 months now, and this condition is still present, so I do have to be a little cautious. So in conclusion, epilepsy is a very rare condition with many different symptoms and causes. It is important to understand and recognize these things so that one can be prepared for the worst. So again, epilepsy is a very difficult condition to treat and evidently has no cure. People must find a way to cope with it and reduce their seizure threshold as good as possible. Understanding this condition can actually save lives and give people a longer and better quality of life. Thank you. I hope you liked this speech and you were informed more on the condition of epilepsy.